Hi, everyone. This is the 50 States High Pointing Podcast and YouTube channel. What started off as a project for a communications class has turned into something that I actually love doing. I have the privilege of providing the platform for people to talk about the extraordinary things they do in the outdoors. High pointing is the challenge of reaching the highest elevation in each of the 50 states. High pointers don't get paid for their hobby. No one is sponsored by an outdoor company, and people fit this challenge into their everyday lives that also include careers and family. I found through these interviews that people who attempt this challenge are incredible and genuinely enjoy talking about their experiences. If you consider yourself a high pointer and you want to share your story on this podcast or interview, please send me an email at 50stateshighpointingpodcast@gmail.com. It has been a pleasure speaking with every high pointer. I hope you enjoy. So can you tell us a little more about some of your more notable U.S. high points?
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to talk about it. So I decided to start off with the hard ones first, like I mentioned previously. And Whitney was the first one in 2009. And after that, I kind of set a goal of at least one per year for myself. So in 2010, it was Boundary, Nevada, over 4th of July weekend. The next year, it was Humphreys in Arizona for a Labor Day trip, which was really cool. Mm-hmm. And then 2012, that was Wheeler, New Mexico, in August. 2013 was that failed attempt on Hood that I talked about.
Okay.
And now I kind of regret not doing anything else that was lower and easier just to fill my gaps. So I have that. But then I kind of, I came back in 2014, and I kind of got revenge because I decided to do all the 14er state high points in 1 year. There's 3 of them. So I started off with Whitney, Mountaineers Route in March. I also mentioned that. That was the preparation for Rainier, which was in June. And then at the end of August that year, I did Albert via that crazy trip. So that was something I wanted to accomplish that year, and I got it done. Then in 2015, I went back and finished off Hood, got my redemption there. And 2016 was also 2 big ones. It was Kings in Utah over 4th of July weekend again to take advantage of the holiday. And then a couple weeks after that, I did the 5-day Gannett trip that I also mentioned, also in July.
Wow.
2017 was the Eclipse with Bora in Idaho.
Right.
It was the centerpiece. 2018, I actually went back to Boundary because I wanted to climb Montgomery Peak, which is the higher mountain on the same ridge, and it's actually in California. So I went back to Boundary, but before that I did Granite in Montana, also in August. So I kind of timed most of these around July, August, because that's obviously the optimal time during the year in terms of conditions. Yeah. And then 2019 was the first time I actually did any of the high points outside of the West. So I flew into Denver in August again. And from there, I went with a friend of mine, and we did Black Elk in South Dakota, and then we wrapped around and did Panorama Point in Nebraska. 2020 was the pandemic year, so that was the first time I actually did any solo high points. And I did the big loop out of Minneapolis over Labor Day weekend. Those were open dates for Charles Mountain, Illinois. So I wanted to get there and, get that one taken care of because it has like special access. And since I was at it, I turned around and I did Iowa, and I did Tim's in Wisconsin, Arbonne in Michigan, and then I finished it off with Eagle in Minnesota. 2021, finally, like pandemic restrictions started coming down. I had a pretty hard time just getting through the formalities to get into the state of Hawaii in April of that year. But when I finally did, I was able to get up Mauna Kea. with Mauna Loa as the warm-up 2 days before that. So I
Cool.
knocked out both those big volcanoes. And then later that year, towards the end, I went to the East Coast and took care of High Point, New Jersey, and Ebright in Delaware for the first time. So, yeah, and then the last trip last year was the cross-country one, coast to coast. I actually stopped in Arizona again to do Humphreys for the second time with my friend in better conditions this time, so we weren't chased by thunderstorms. And then after that, I started picking up the ones I didn't have. So Black Mesa, Oklahoma, Mount Sunflower, Kansas, Taumsauk, Missouri, Hoosier Hill, Indiana, and Campbell Hill, Ohio, Spruce Knob, West Virginia, Backbone Mountain or Hoyt Crest, Maryland, whichever one you want, Mount Davis, Pennsylvania, and then one more time, Ebright, Delaware. So that's it for now.
So why'd you go to Delaware twice?
I think I mentioned that my family has property that's very close to the High Point, so
Oh, that's right. Okay.
it's super convenient. It's like it's a stroll. I'm like, I have got nothing to do. I'm going to tag this High Point again.
Okay. Because usually people, they go to a high point twice if they really loved it or they want a different experience or the weather was bad, but I just can't imagine any of that happening at the Delaware High Point, so I had to ask.
You're right. It's solely by convenience, just by being
Okay. So, I'm sure we talked about it in the first episode, but I can't remember. What is your favorite high point in the West and the rest of the country?
Okay. In the West, I still like Rainier. That was one of the most challenging climbs I've ever done, and I did talk about that a little bit. I do have plans on going back for it at some point as training for bigger objectives. One thing I wanted to revisit from the last podcast was you asked me which one I would like to redo.
Yeah.
And there's actually two of them, and they're both out east. So Spruce Knob in West Virginia, it was an overcast day, so we had no views. It was all foggy at the top.
Okay.
And I was kind of bummed to not be able to see the Appalachians all spread out. So I would love to go back and have that opportunity. And then High Point, New Jersey was kind of the same thing. It was an overcast, wintry day with the wind was blowing hard, so you couldn't really feel your extremities. It was super cold. So I'd like to go back to that one and just have the views on a nice day.
Sure. You do county high points too. Can you talk about some of your most notable county high points?
Absolutely. Yes, I do county high points as well. And for those, I also kind of made the decision to hang out mostly in the West because that's where all the challenging ones are.
Yeah.
And they give me a purpose of actually doing mountaineering as opposed to random spots in the flat Midwest or out on the East Coast in the swamps. So I kind of put some limits on myself as to the quality of the high points I'm going to go after in terms of counties. But I think one of my favorite ones is North Palisade here in California. By consensus, it is considered the hardest one on the California County High Points list because it's a Class 4 scramble by the easiest route. So you do need to have some experience. You need to be comfortable with climbing. We used ropes on that one. And I'm very grateful to my friend who's a rock climber who was with me in my group at that time because he safeguarded our descent from that one. But that was an amazing accomplishment for myself, being able to overcome the challenges of that one. And it's a 14er as well, so it's a high one.
Yeah, and that's not far from where you are in Bishop, correct?
That's right. It's just down the highway, as we say it.
Down 395?
Down 395, yeah. So it's usually approached out of Big Pine, which is 15 miles south of here. It's a small community. But I actually went in from the north side, from the Bishop side, and then I wrapped around the back because that's where the easier route is, up until the very top.
Oh, cool. So is that your favorite county high point?
It's one of my most challenging ones, and by virtue of being that, it is one of my most memorable ones. It's a favorite for sure.
What are some other ones?
I really loved Ruby Dome in northern Nevada. It's just south of Elko. That one is a fabulous day hike. It goes through a lot of granite. That reminds me of Sierra. And the views are phenomenal. So on a good day, that is a fabulous, fantastic mountain with excellent scenery.
And where in Nevada is that?
That is in the northeastern part of Nevada, just outside of Elko. Elko is like the largest city in northeastern Nevada.
Okay. And so when you came out to Kofa to hike Signal Peak or Castle Dome, was that on a county high point adventure, or was that a desert feature that you liked?
It was mostly a desert trip.
Okay.
I also like focus on a list called the Desert Peaks Sections list.
Okay.
And this is a chapter of the Sierra Club in Southern California. They kind of put together lists of peaks in not just California, but the surrounding states as well. And the Desert Peaks one is one of those. And Signal Peak in Yuma is one of the emblem peaks on that list. It's recognized as one of the best ones and most challenging ones.
Oh.
So when I went out
that's
there
really
for
cool.
it, that's the reason why I went after it at the time, which was almost 10 years ago now. It's because it had this emblem status. It was something special on that list.
That's really interesting. I'm wondering if there's a peak on that list called Mohawk Peak, and it's part of the Berry Goldwater Mountain Range in Arizona, if that sounds familiar.
It does. I've seen Mohawk. I do have plans to climb it at some point. It is not on the Desert Peaks list, so it is not on that official list, but it's on several other lists that people have put together with all sorts of criteria. So there are endless lists of everything for everyone.
Wow. So I know Mohawk because I used to drive past it on I-8 all the time when I would drive from Tucson to Yuma and back. And it is just such I don't know how to describe. I mean, it looks like a Mohawk. As you're driving on the interstate and you pass it, it looks like you're looking at a Mohawk haircut on someone's head, especially when you come right up to the mountain. It's so just razor sharp, that whole ridge line. And the actual peak, it's very fine, and it comes to just this really small point. And I would always think as I drove past it, can you even climb? Can you even stand on that? And you can. I couldn't find it on all trails, which is always my last resort. But I did. I ended up, going on to the dark side of the web, page 2 of Google, to find someone's trip report from a couple years ago up Mohawk Peak, and then my husband and I did it in January, and it was so cool. We were the only ones out there, and all I can say is you have to have shoes with good traction, because there are, as you get to the summit of that peak, there are a lot of moments where there are a lot of if you fall you die kind of cliffs. So always good to have shoes with good traction, and you should bring trekking poles because there's a lot of loose rock, and there's no signs, that tell you where to go, or there's no rock cairns or anything. So, but that's what I love about it. It's so rugged. So you will definitely love Mohawk Peak, and you are the first person that I've spoken with that actually knows what Mohawk Peak is and where it is.
Yeah. Well, I'm the first one that you spoke with, but I know several other people who know about the peak and have also climbed it. So,
really?
Yeah. Among those of us who are a little obsessed about these things, things can get pretty detailed. So, yeah, we are aware of each other and what we do. Mohawk, like many other peaks, is very aptly named because of their, shapes, sizes, whatever. So I'm glad you had that opportunity. I think it sounds awesome. And off-trail climbs and hikes are some of my favorites.
For sure. When we signed the summit register, we were the first people to do that climb, well, the first people to sign in the Summit Register in 2023. And I think the last person to sign it was in 2021.
That is
it's
not
just
unusual
not,
at all.
Right. It's just not very heavily trafficked. Or I can imagine a lot of people get close to that summit and just look up and go, no, because it is a little intimidating. It really is. The only thing that I didn't like about that hike, and I knew this going into it, is that you can hear traffic on the interstate, like almost the entire time. Because, of course, the interstate runs through that mountain range.
Yeah. That's the case also with I-15 going to Vegas. There's a bunch of smaller desert ranges that are off on one side or the other of the highway. And, you know, you wind your way through canyons or you come up over a ridge, and then as soon as you hit that, you hear the traffic, the trucks, all this stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah.
But that doesn't take away anything from the peak itself or, like, the experience that it brings with climbing it. So, again, I'm glad you had that opportunity because not a lot of people climb these kind of things.
Yeah. And, well, after you do Mohawk, you'll have to come back and tell me how it is.
Yeah, and you should do Signal. I think you'll love that one.
Oh, I've done it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, oops. Sorry. Yes, you did say
I've
that.
done Signal and Castle Dome. Have you done Castle Dome?
I have a story about that one, too.
Oh, what is it? Oh, I have a story, too. We couldn't find where the trail started the first time we went up there. And we actually tried to approach it from the other side before we realized, like, this can't be it. So we went home that day and then just did a little more research, went back a couple weeks later from the correct side. But you have to have a very capable off-road vehicle to get to the approach, or you're going to do a lot of walking from wherever you can park. So I think we did it in October. And that was one of my first hikes that I did when I got to Arizona. I think I was probably less prepared than I should have been in terms of gear and like shoes and stuff. There's a lot of loose stuff up there, you know. And I took so many little falls, and I naturally would put my hands, you know, in front of me as I fell. But I would end up hugging these little like barrel cacti just to stop my fall. And so I came out of that hike with a lot of things stuck in me. Oh, and then when we got to the top of Castle Dome, I was just walking along that area, you know, on the summit, because it's pretty wide. And I just walked past this teddy bear cholla cactus. Like, I swear I didn't touch it, but I must have just lightly grazed it. And that entire plant just latched on to my knee. And so we just had to, like, pick off each little piece. It hurt so much. And then we had to go down. Anyway, that's my Castle Dome story. What's yours?
That sounds very familiar, picking, like, spines and other sharp objects from your body on desert hikes.
Yeah.
That's happened many times. I'm very familiar with that. My story for Castle Dome, which was done on the same trip with Signal, was that we got there pretty late in the day, and it was in December, actually. So very short days in terms of light. We also had to stop early because the road was getting pretty bad. So I also tried to approach it from the backside. Okay. And as we're making our way up, we got to a point where I didn't feel comfortable about it because it was kind of getting class 4, almost 5 terrain. So we made the decision to retreat at that point, and I wasn't sure if we're going to like have enough daylight to actually attempt the normal route, which I also had trouble like finding the start for. So I was with a group of people. Not everyone was an experienced rock climber. So eventually we found the trail that we were supposed to be on, the normal route, and we wound our way up to that notch, which is where the scrambling part starts. That's where the scrambling part starts. And as you're familiar, you follow the stacked rocks, which are called cairns or ducks.
Yeah.
And at that point, it got pretty easy, but we were basically racing the sun. So we got to the summit right at sunset. So I have these awesome pictures of us on top of the mountain at sunset with like this really like deep light and dark shadows all over. So at that point, I was like, okay, take a picture. Let's get out of here. So we raced our way down, and we made it down off the scrambly part before it got totally dark. But the rest of the way back to the car was by torch or headlamp and GPS. So that's my story.
Oh, man. So you did Signal Peak in the same trip. That's a lot.
Yeah, it was the very next day after Castle Dome.
And that's a longer hike.
That is a longer hike. And we also had to drive from one to the other. So, yeah, it was...
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So we had to plan all that out. But it was a better strategy for Signal. We started earlier and was able to drive in further, too. So that helped. But it was awesome. The bighorn sheep were the highlight for that one.
I can't believe you saw those. I've been there, not a lot of times, but to the Kofa National Wildlife Refuge, I've been there a handful of times. And I've never seen a bighorn sheep. Only... a couple tarantulas or, lizards or something.
Some birds.
But that is a really cool experience if you saw those.
Yeah, and one of the persons was able to film them just kind of like scampering down rocks and stuff.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Oh, that's incredible. Wow.
The Navajo County High Point in Arizona, which is called Black Mesa, is on the Navajo Reservation, and you do need to obtain a permit from the tribe to be able to be in that area when you actually visit it. So that is on my to-do list in some indeterminate future. I need to go climb that one.
That's awesome. So what are some other county high points that you would recommend?
One of my other favorites in Nevada is Mount Charleston, right outside of Vegas.
Okay.
That's a Clark County high point, which is the county that Vegas is in. The Spring Mountains are a fabulous limestone range to the west of Vegas. It's also where Red Rock Canyon is, the famous climbing area.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
But high above that, at 11,000 feet, towers Charleston Peak, which is the range high point and the highest mountain in that area, and that's a fabulous one. I just took friends up there for the second time. I first climbed it in spring conditions with snow 10 years ago, and then I went back last year in the dead of summer and did it again. It was in August, so it was a little hot down low, but up there it was perfect. So I highly recommend.
So
that
do you
one.
find
That's a great
these?
one.
Yeah. Do you find that these county high points are less crowded than the state high points?
Most of them are. The ones around Los Angeles area, which are the three saints I mentioned last time, San Antonio, Baldy, San Gorgonio, and San Jacinto, those tend to see a lot of traffic, and they're all county high points too. So, so those get a lot of love. They're almost loved to death, as the saying goes. But a lot of the ones further north or in the Sierra or out in Nevada, they're not. Very few people know about them.
So are the Southern California regional high points, some of those are along the Pacific Crest Trail, correct?
They are, yeah.
So that plays a role in the traffic.
It's not as much that as the number of day hikers that come up from the LA metro area.
Okay.
There are so many trails to these peaks that they're very accessible. So people don't really feel the need to spend the night out there. They can just go and tag them on weekends. So I think that's where most of the traffic comes. But yeah, for sure, like people who are doing the Pacific Crest Trail or some longer distance hike will climb to the top because it's convenient.
So county high points you've done in California, Nevada, and what other states?
I've done most of Arizona. I've done most of Nevada. I hope to finish those states soon. I've done Utah, Oregon, Washington, Montana, and Colorado. So another favorite of mine is Blanca Peak in Colorado, which is also a 14er. That was a 3-day backpacking trip back in 2015, and it was awesome. So I really enjoyed it.
That sounds amazing. When you were in Tucson doing that county high point, was that Mount Lemmon?
It was, yes.
Yeah.
So Mount Lemmon, the main summit is County High Point, but there's actually another one to the north of it on that ridge that extends northward, and I think that's the Pina County High Point or Pinal.
Yeah.
And it is what we call a liner. A liner is the high point is on the county line, but it's not necessarily the summit. So it's just a random elevation that's determined by where people decided to put the county boundary.
Interesting. You can drive up Mount Lemmon. A lot of people do that. It gets crowded up there in the summer because it's obviously hot in Tucson, and then people want cooler weather, so it gets crowded on top of Mount Lemmon where that little bakery is.
Yeah, I did it in November when it was freezing cold, so that's my experience.
Oh, was there snow?
Maybe just a little bit. I'm trying to remember, but it was definitely very windy, so the wind and the end of the day made it super cold.
Yeah. So can you talk about some of the international high points that you do?
Sure. So my personal record for altitude is Pico de Orizaba in Mexico, which I climbed in November of last year, along with 3 other volcanoes in Mexico. So those are some of my favorites. I did Ista, I did La Malinche, and I did Nevado de Toluca. On that trip.
I've done that one, Nevado de Toluca.
It's awesome. It's a great peak.
Yeah. I remember when I got up there was a soccer team practicing in that, I don't know, that one area by that shelter. Mm-hmm. It's like kind of down by a lake. That I was like, that's a good idea.
Yeah, because it's at over 14,000 feet, almost 15 up there. So
I think it was like 15 and some change.
That was my Mexico trip last year, and I was also fortunate to be able to climb Mont Blanc in summer of last year. I mentioned that last time. That was a whole experience. And then going over to Turkey and doing Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey, that was another fabulous experience. So, yeah, and then I did a bunch of things in Romania, my home country, along with the country high point, which was great.
So when you tell your Romanian friends and family about these high points that you do all over the world, what do they say?
The people in Romania or just my family?
Both.
Yeah, it's hard to explain things like this, especially to people who don't participate in strenuous activities. I just kind of frame it as something that I'm passionate about and that I find myself in. So that's kind of how I explain it to them. There's obviously the health benefits of it, right? It keeps you active, it keeps you focused. But it's also, it's something that I'm very interested and passionate about, and sharing my experiences with people via pictures, videos, and just storytelling like we're doing right now.
And so what do the Romanians say?
They're like, what's the point of this?
What do you say?
I usually go back with a question like, does there have to be a point to anything? So sometimes we do things just because we enjoy them, and then for the personal gratification that we get out of things like this. So and this doesn't apply to just people in Romania, but like usually when I get questions about this is sometimes the questions are asked in a way that it makes it sound like you're conquering something, right? Like, did you conquer this mountain? Did you defeat this one? And I don't tend to think that way. I don't think it's a battle where you have to, like, you perceive the mountain as an enemy that you have to like slay or anything like that. One quote that is inspiring to me is what Edmund Hillary said when they were climbing Mount Everest back in 1953. He said, it's not the mountain that we conquer, but ourselves, right? So the things we do because it's a struggle against ourselves. We want to prove to ourselves that we can do this. It's a personal thing. So that's how I respond to the people who say, have you conquered this? Have you done this? I'm not conquering anything. I'm out there to like test myself, to push my limits, and then to see how far I can take it, just for myself. Like, I don't have anything to prove to anyone. I'm doing it because...
That's right, yeah.
I'm doing it because I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of people say that it's such a selfish endeavor because ultimately you might not be helping anyone else when you climb a mountain, but not everything has to be that way. Sometimes I think we just need our own personal passions, and there's nothing wrong with having this one.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, and I also agree that it is a selfish, endeavor. But I feel like we're also discovering ourselves in this. Like, it makes us realize who we are and what we're capable of, right? Like, how tough are you mentally? How tough are you physically to overcome this challenge? And it's always at the personal level, right? Like, unless you have like some really well stated goal, or you make a big deal out of your expedition, it's all about overcoming your own limitations. So from that perspective, you want to be selfish. You want to like struggle against yourself. You want to be able to prevail against the weaknesses that define you. So you do that. If you do that, that means you've accomplished your purpose, and you can continue doing that, and it gives you something back. It makes you a better person.
Yeah, of course. And then when you accomplish those goals, I think it maybe makes you closer to a better version of yourself, which probably manifests in other areas of life.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I do feel like I've become a better person by doing this. I'm more tolerant, more understanding, and not as quickly to judge. Just because the mountains have taught me a lot of things. Like, they've taught me to be patient. They've taught me to be appreciative, and they've taught me that everything is very fleeting, right? So if you don't take advantage of what you have right now, and you don't enjoy what you have right now, it may not be there, a day, a week, a month, or a year from now. So life is short. Just live it up.
That's very true. So what's your next high point?
I don't know yet. I have a few lined up in Romania when I'm going to visit family, and then I'm working on plans for the summer. Maybe a trip to Bolivia to do some of the Andean peaks.
Yeah.
I hope to go to Ecuador towards the end of the year, and I actually just started work on a Brazil trip for next year, so we'll see how that goes. And I need to like start chipping away at the South because I haven't done much there. I'm kind of like I said, I'm working my way from west to east, and eventually I'll probably kind of like narrow it down towards like the northeastern part of the country. I do have Guadalupe in Texas set aside as my finish whenever that happens.
That's right. Yeah.
But until then, like, everything is fair game. So I'm an opportunist. I just take whatever comes to me whenever it comes. So I don't make any specific plans other than I need to hit at least one per year, wherever it happens to be.
Perfect. Do you have another county high point?
I'm hoping to finish Nevada and Arizona this year. So I've got 3 left in Nevada, and I have 6 or 7 left in Arizona. So it's an achievable goal. And with these, like, it's not just about the numbers, but it's also about the time to like get there, the hikes themselves. So like it's a lot of effort, and it has to be planned properly. So
who else does these county high points with you? That seems like it has to be a very dedicated group of people.
There is a website called cohp.org, and that stands for countyhighpoints.org.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the main website where it explains what they are, who's involved. It's a little dated right now because a lot of people have migrated over to other resources and other forums, but it's still a good resource. Peakbagger.com is the website that we all go to for the most recent trip reports, GPS tracks, and so on. There is actually a section in Apex to Zenith for the state high pointers. in the magazine where they do talk about county high points at some point. And a couple of years ago, when I finished California, I did get recognition in that section of the newsletter. So I'm grateful for that.
And for the listeners who don't know, Apex to Zenith is the High Pointers Club official magazine or newsletter. And you probably should be getting one in the mail any day now. The winter issue should show up. And the podcast will be featured in that issue.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to receiving mine. I do hope to see your podcast in that. But I renew my High Pointers Club membership on a yearly basis.
Well, that's really awesome. Do you ever think that you'll get into state low pointing?
No, that is a definite no.
I had to ask because there's a list out there.
Because it's really hard to define what a low point is, right? For something like a mountain ride, especially, something that's sharp, where the high point is. It's at that very top. But how can you tell where the low point is, especially for something that has a coastline? Like, how do you pick a low point?
Is it just anywhere along the coast?
Yeah, see, so it's open to interpretation. It's really hard to come to a consensus. And then it's not a low point anymore. It's a bunch of low points. So it can be any one of them.
Yeah, like there's no surveyor marker on the beach. Yeah, that's right.
I do like, for myself, I do like well-defined kind of targets where they're not subject to as much uncertainty as like some of these things can be. But yeah, I mean, I get it. People need like all sorts of hobbies and pursuits. I've heard about tri pointing, confluence points. Do you know what confluence points are?
No.
Those are the locations where the parallels for latitude and then meridians for longitude intersect. So.
Oh.
And it's the ones that are integers. It's not the ones that have decimals, but it's the full number ones. Those are confluence points.
And so there are people who make a club out of this and go around and get them.
Yeah, there are people who do that, and a bunch of those are in the oceans. So tough luck.
Wow, that I learned a lot in this conversation. Man, I thought state high pointers were obsessed.
Oh no, it gets quite a bit more intense than that.
Yeah. I've heard of people doing national park high points too, which some of those are state high points.
Yeah, and that is actually a wonderful pursuit. I've done a bunch of those myself. I would love to do some more, but it's not a priority at this point. So, I think like seeing the parks is a great way of getting to know your country, like we were talking.
Yeah, I love visiting parks. And every time I visit one, I'm like, well, what is the highest point? Oh, can I do it? Like in a little day hike? And if I can, then I do it. Like I did that at Saguaro National Park, the Channel Islands when we were on Santa Cruz Island. But, those aren't really high, and there's like a perfectly paved path to the top. But it's still fun to see the surveyor marker there.
Yeah, exactly. So you just take what you get at that particular point, right? So some of them can be, multi-day expeditions. Some of them can just be a walked up a paved path. But, they're all unique in their own ways. Yeah,
they are. Well, and what I like about the National Park high points is like you already have a designated area that is set aside to preserve some sort of ecosystem or animal or something or plant. And then on top of that, to go to the highest point there, it's such a unique experience because then you can look around at this unique setting that no one else can really touch because the government said, like, this is a really special place,
Right. Although, I will say I've been in national parks in other countries, and those tend to be a lot, or not a lot more, but like they are structured differently in that people in local communities live within the park itself. So that way they are acknowledged as the stewards of the land, right? Like they've been there for generations. they learn to coexist with the place. So yeah, you're trying to preserve a resource, but you're also okay with having people there. Like you don't have to like get all the people out, like we tend to do over here. So there are multiple ways of managing the parks, and for people to interact with them. But yeah, I'm grateful as like someone who is a new American to be able to experience our parks and the ecosystems they preserve.
Mm-hmm. There are some people that live in the Grand Canyon that have a sukai.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be able to have them safeguarded for all generations to explore and enjoy. So I hope we'll be able to continue doing that.
Yeah, there's a documentary called National Parks, America's Best Idea, or something along those lines. It's a Ken Burns documentary. And in the beginning few episodes, they talk about Niagara Falls and how the idea of the national parks was to be not Niagara Falls, in that it's overly commercialized. The falls themselves are beautiful. I've been there, but it is a little overbuilt, over-constructed, over-commercialized, over everything. And in this documentary, they did explain that was what they didn't want to happen. And the only way to do that was to get a designation from the government.
And I have watched that documentary as well. I have not been to Niagara Falls myself yet. But I'm very familiar with how the parks came to be in this country. And then how the concept of a park, of a protected area, was exported to like other parts of the world that kind of followed the United States lead. And you're right, like I have been to other parts of the world, other countries where resources are still commercialized, they're not protected, everyone kind of does whatever they want there because they're after profit, that's one of the incentives for that everyone all over the world understands. So it's kind of sad to see that. I had that experience, just as a quick example, at Ararat in Turkey. The mountain itself is fabulous, but it is overrun with guides and guide services that kind of, everyone does their own thing on the mountain, and there's no like trash removal, there's no protection for camping areas, there are no waste facilities for people, so it's a very free-for-all, and it was very sad to see that despite the great experience I've had being on the mountain itself. So I'm acutely aware of what's happening and the need to protect, but we need to strike that balance, right, between allowing people use of the resource, especially people who have been there a long time, and preserving it for future generations.
I don't know if you've ever experienced the reservation system, or if you've ever gone through that in any of the national parks, but I had to do that for Yosemite last summer, and because I wanted to visit Yosemite combined with my Whitney climb. That was a scheduling nightmare. I mean, it was like Black Friday trying to get a reservation.
It's an onerous process, and I'm actually going through that right now. Among my plans for the summer are to climb Mount Cleveland in Glacier National Park.
Oh,
so
nice.
That is the same kind of deal that you experienced in Yosemite, where you have to apply for permits via their system, and there's limited number of permits, there's limited number of backcountry sites where you're allowed to camp. So going through all of that is super frustrating and stressful, and I have opinions on it that I should probably not express right now.
Yeah, I see both sides, because you gotta, like, everyone would be driving. You would not be able to go down, what is that road in Glacier, over the Sun Road, or going to the Sun Road. You would not be able to drive down there if there weren't a permit system. And Yosemite would be overrun, especially in the age of, Instagram and everyone having seen Free Solo and Dawnwall and all that. It would be completely overrun, and resources would be damaged. I completely understand that. But on the other hand, the parks were established for the benefit and enjoyment of all the people. And just like you said, it is so stressful trying to get in there. It's sometimes it doesn't feel like a benefit or an enjoyment.
because it's not. You're excluding people based mostly on their ability to like navigate a cumbersome process of getting
right. But at least it's not. I mean, the fee is minimal, and it's not like auction based or something like that, where only a few people can get in. But it's a tough balance that the National Park Service has to find with that challenge.
I agree with that. I just don't. I don't approve of like the ability to exclude people based on how they perform in this permit system. So
yeah, and when you say the word perform, it's really just signing on at a particular time, and so many people sign on to the website that it shuts down sometimes the day that the permit system opens for certain campsites or parks.
And the people who are opportunists and smart can write code to create bots that get in front of actual people who are clicking the button to like get their reservation, because that's what bots do. They just watch for the optimal conditions and then they go for it. So that's how a lot of these reservations are not available anymore all of a sudden.
Also, I know some people who will just, not because they want to do this or because they have specific plans, but they'll just enter a lottery and just snag a reservation or a campsite just to have it there in case they want to go. And then when they don't go, they don't cancel it. And so you're really just stealing that spot from somebody who actually wants to be there. It's a challenge because what we were talking about earlier, everyone wants a picture in a certain spot, because having a picture in this really cool looking spot looks good on your Instagram, or people might think that you're more adventurous than you actually are, and that's the image that you want to portray. So you have to be in this one spot, get a picture at the golden hour or whatever. And it's that mentality takes away opportunities for people who would do this stuff without a camera. And that's what grinds my gears.
Yeah. And for me, that was one of the reasons why I kind of like gravitated away from like the whole hiking trail system. It's because I couldn't really get access to the places that I wanted to go to. So my accumulated experience allowed me to like go off trail, to like go in places that a lot of people would not venture to because it's just simply too like dangerous for them. So I feel that those are more rewarding locations, just through the virtue of like not being so touched by so many people. But I understand not everyone is able to do that. So I do share that frustration. Sometimes you just want to go camp and you can't.
Yeah, and I agree. That's why I like, climbing things out in Kofa National Wildlife Refuge or Mohawk Peak. Because anytime you want to camp out in Kofa, you just bring a tent and set it up, and no one else is there, because it doesn't have that designation of a park. And I hope it stays that way.
I hope so too. I have conversations with friends who have 4-wheel drive vehicles that can take us anywhere, and whenever we hear of a road that got washed out or like something happened that limits access, they're like, just leave it like that. It'll limit the number of people that can go in there. So I mean, it's kind of an extreme way to think about it, but it also makes sense, right? Like if you just let it go to nature how it was supposed to be, only people who are prepared to go in there will go in there.
That's true.
There are, trails like the Pacific Crest Trail and the John Muir Trail and you name it, that do have to be maintained. Trees blow down, trail crumbles, like a number of things can happen. Those need to like be in top shape, and absolutely.
There's this monument in southern Arizona, Chiricahua National Monument, and it's like a bunch of hoodoo, rock formations. And for years, people have been saying, "Oh, this is like on the list next to become a national park," and I just think, I kind of hope it doesn't. Because I like going there and not having a ton of people.
Incidentally, Chiricahua, that's the one. Chiricahua Peak is the one I'm going to finish the Arizona County High Points on, so I kind of set that one aside. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. You have to tell me how that one goes. I like it out there.
I will let you know. I haven't made it out to that eastern part of the state yet, but the peak itself is not in the national monument. They're close by, but they're not linked. And I hope it doesn't get loved to death like some of these parks do.
That's right. Yeah, me too. Thanks for your time, Mihai, and I hope you enjoy your trip to Romania coming up.
Thank you, Lauren.
Definitely share your next state, county, and international high points with us. This has been a cool conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you for having me, and I would be honored to talk about it with you and others more. It's all about what you learn from others too, right? Like, it was an educational process for me as well. I learned from so many people, and I hope to pass on whatever knowledge I have to others.